So streaming and physical media, basically the two ways that people enjoy movies right now at home. Either you're watching on Netflix, Prime Video, Hulu, whatever, or you're watching on DVD, Blu-ray, or the new 4K UHD format. But those are the two primary methods that people are watching movies, and there are some significant differences between the two of them. So in this video, I want to explore what those differences are between quality, availability, convenience. We'll cover all the pros and cons of each and help you to make a decision maybe on which version of entertainment you want to go with, or if you want to do a mix of both. And I hope in this video, if you're hardcore on the streaming side or you're hardcore on the physical media side, by the end of this, I think a healthy mix is really what everybody should be doing to get the most home entertainment quality and enjoyment. So no matter how you're watching your movies, there are some major differences and some things that you should know when it comes to quality, availability, the convenience factor. We'll cover all of that in this video and give you a nice breakdown of that streaming versus physical media battle and where each one fits into the home entertainment environment. Real quick, this was a video I did a few years back, but I am refreshing some of my older videos with new content, better look, better audio. So that's what we're doing here, and I hope you find this helpful. So to start, we've got to talk about quality. Streaming quality versus physical media quality. Now, regardless of what you've heard, everything in home entertainment is compressed. Nobody's getting a fully uncompressed video image that hasn't gone through some sort of compression and some sort of funnel to get it to a home entertainment environment. If you wanted a full uncompressed movie file, you would need a terabyte of data. I mean, it's a crazy large file. Everything gets compressed down, and streaming and physical are both compressed. Now, for the purposes of this video, let's talk about a 4K movie. The latest 4K movie, the latest greatest thing. It's, maybe streaming on Netflix and it's available on a 4K Blu-ray disc. If you get the 4K Blu-ray disc, your file size is probably going to be somewhere between 70 to 90 gigabytes. That's on the higher end, but somewhere in that range will be the size of your video file, depending on the length of the movie. But it's fairly large and it's not quite as compressed. On the streaming side, I don't know exact file sizes because Netflix will never tell you, hey, this file is this large, but you can guess based on some digital downloads from services like a Movies Anywhere or a Vudu that a 4K digital file is probably falling somewhere in like the 10 to 15 gigabyte range. So compare that to physical media and what you get on the disc, and you're looking at, 4 to 5 times more compressed than what's on physical media. Now, does this mean the streaming image is 4 to 5 times worse looking? No, it doesn't mean that, because compression technology has come a long way, and you can compress 4K files down to a pretty small size and still retain a lot of the quality for most of the movie. But where you will find issues is especially with really dark movies. That's always where I find the biggest issue. If you remember watching Game of Thrones, the Long Night episode, everyone complained it was too dark, and their screens had all these kind of gray, black, white blocks all over them. It looked almost pixelated. The reason for that was that the streaming services and cable TV can't handle the file size needed to make that look great. And so they compressed it way down. And when you compress it that far down and you get into some of these darker sequences, you start to see what they call blocking. And that's where you have squares kind of popping up all over your screen. It looks very pixelated. You will notice this on Netflix 4K movies. You will notice it on every streaming service when you're watching a TV show. It happens because of their compression. That's one of the more extreme examples. I mean, you will see if you really dive in close to the TV and you look at a 4K image on a disc versus streaming, you will see some quality differences. You will see some, finer detail on the disc. You will see that sharper, better image on a disc. But it really comes into play, honestly, for me, most times when I'm watching something really dark. Horror movies in particular can look rough. Watching something like Hereditary on a streaming service is just not a good experience. It's too dark. You get all that blocking. I recently watched Immaculate, and they were great enough to send me a screening link of that, which I watched through my computer, blocking and all of this. And the director of the films actually talked about it, how it just, the streaming services and digital services couldn't handle that level of compression. So if you watch it on a disc, physical media, Blu-ray 4K, you're going to be able to handle that, and you're going to have a better picture quality. You're not going to have those issues because it's going to be less compressed and it's going to be able to handle that image. Now, the other side of quality is audio. And yes, Netflix, HBO, you name it, a lot of them have Dolby Atmos audio, but I'm going to say Dolby Atmos in quotes because truly streaming Dolby Atmos is still a different version of Dolby Atmos than what's on a disc. And Dolby Atmos is the top-notch technology, or DTS-X, DTS-HD. You could hear a lot of different names for high-end surround sound. But when you're watching it on streaming, it is still a compressed down version. Think of it like if you're listening to a song on Spotify versus you're listening to a song on a CD, right? Spotify will give you the song, but if you listen to certain songs, I know one in particular, The Black Parade by My Chemical Romance, sounds horrible on streaming because there's so much going on. It gets compressed, it gets kind of chunky, all the sounds mixed together, it gets distorted. If you listen to that on a higher quality service, a higher quality file that you download, or you listen to it on a CD or a vinyl record, you're not going to have that issue. It's able to contain the amount of data that it needs to capture all of that. And so it's not going to be 100% of the time you're going to notice a difference, but there are going to be instances where you definitely see issues with streaming content audio-wise and visually that you won't have the same issues with on a disc. What I can say is if streaming is problematic, say 5% of the time for the average consumer when it comes to quality, physical media is less than 1% of the time. It's a much more consistent format. It's a better format. It has larger file sizes, which means less compression, better quality, full booming sound, no compressed audio, all the greatest from what, the director, the filmmaker intended. That's what you're getting on physical media. That is why guys like Denis Villeneuve, that's why guys like Christopher Nolan, that's why these guys talk about physical media, because they know that you're not going to get the best experience necessarily watching on streaming. They do know streaming is more convenient and has a wider audience, but they know that their true vision is going to be on the disc. Now, the next thing is certainly convenience and availability. So yes, streaming wins the convenience battle all day. You can buy a Fire Stick off of Amazon for $40, buy an Apple TV, a Roku, whatever. You can get it for very cheap. You get all your streaming apps on there. With a couple clicks of a button, you've got a movie playing. You can also download movies, store them on your computer, store them on your device. Digital is very, very convenient. On the physical media side, you need a lot of stuff. You need a 4K player or some kind of player, maybe a gaming console to read the disc. You're going to need that special HDMI cord to be able to play 4K. You're going to potentially need an audio receiver and external speakers or a sound bar to get the full audio. So if you want the best experience with 4K, you got to spend some money, you got to upgrade, you got to buy a player, you got to buy equipment. Otherwise, you're probably doing yourself a disservice, and you should just be streaming if you don't have at least a sound bar and a new TV and a decent player. And yeah, you don't have to go to the shelf and pick a movie and walk over to the player and put the disc in. I mean, we've come to that point of laziness as a society. That all takes about 10 seconds, so I'm never going to say, oh yeah, it's so much better, because you're going to scroll through a streaming service for just as long. But yeah, you have to get off your butt and pick up a disc and put it in the player, and when it's over, you got to do the same thing and take it out and put it back in the case. I know. God forbid. Now, availability is a really interesting one because it feels like streaming has everything. There's so many services, so many different movies. But in reality, there are actually more titles available on physical media by a large margin than there are on streaming services. And there are some streaming exclusives that you can only get on Disney Plus or you can only get on Hulu that don't exist on physical media. So sure, there's that. But if you're just looking to watch movies and you want the accessibility to a bunch of films, physical media can't be beat. Even if you go back to the days of DVD, which are still being sold in huge quantities for a lot of older films, TV shows, stuff that simply isn't on streaming services is at least on DVD. Much of it is on Blu-ray, or at least a good chunk. And there are even a lot of good 4K movies that aren't necessarily available on streaming. Especially if you want to dive deeper into genre films, foreign films, horror films. There are great services like Canopy, which has a bunch of movies, or Shudder, which has great horror films and all those originals, and Criterion Channel and Arrow Video and Shout TV. There are these niche streaming services, but they still don't touch the selection of what's available out there on a physical media format, whether it's DVD, Blu-ray, or 4K. That library of physical media is huge compared to what's on streaming. And then finally, yes, cost. Of course, there's cost to talk about. What's a streaming service cost these days? Between $15 and $20 a month. So let's say on average, with bundles and stuff, you're spending $70, $80 a month on different streaming services. That feels reasonable, maybe even a little bit high for some people. Maybe call it $50, $60. And you do have access to thousands of movies and thousands of TV shows for that same low price. totally on the cost argument, streaming wins. For $50 or $60, even if you go to a pawn shop or the dollar store, you find really good deals online. The best you can probably do is about $3 to $4 per disc. So you're looking at maybe getting 10 discs, 12 discs a month if you're lucky. So you've got access to 10 or 12, which does build up over time for your $40 or $50 a month. But the streaming people, on your streaming services, you have access to thousands every month. However, streaming is recurring. So it's a recurring cost. It's easy to forget about. It's easy to set and forget. And 5 years from now, still be paying for something you don't use versus physical media, which is a tangible purchase. It's an actual decision you make. You don't just get charged every month for it. You go out and make that decision. So if you have a bad month and you don't want to spend the money, you don't have to. Instead of having to cancel streaming services or in the middle of the month and they lock you in for the rest of the month. That's the only way that the cost thing really works in the favor of physical. I'll never say physical media is cheaper. It is not. You pay for the quality, you pay for ownership and the access to the films, which digital and streaming don't give you, but it's never going to be cheaper. Streaming is cheaper. So ultimately, when it really comes down to it, right, there's always this battle of, are you a streaming guy or a physical media guy? I'll never stream. I'll never buy DVDs. I see a lot of this in the comments, and I think that's the minority of people, because the reality is, like me too, I have every streaming service, HBO, Netflix, Hulu, Apple TV right now on a free trial, luckily. You name it. I have them all. Shudder. I pay for Shudder, Peacock, I've got them. And the reality is that a good mix of both is probably where most people should live. I would never say, oh yeah, just stream, you'll be fine, because you never know. Your movies may not be there. It's a recurring subscription cost. I would always say, you're better off buying a library of your favorite TV shows, your favorite movies, maybe having 50 to 100 discs, spending that money up front, and then streaming everything else. But it also doesn't make sense to just say, I'll never stream and I'll only buy physical media, because you're missing out on a lot of great content. And it's not just streaming exclusives. There's documentaries and things that'll just never come to disc that you won't see. There's indie films that you won't see that will never come to disc. There's great stuff out there on those streaming services. And by supporting them and those filmmakers, hopefully they can grow and get bigger. But that's truly the way for indie filmmakers right now, is streaming and digital platforms. It's very expensive to start a physical media release or try to get distribution. It's difficult. So this is the avenue for indie filmmakers, where in the past it may have been bootleg VHS tapes and DVDs and stuff at video stores. They don't have that option anymore. And so unfortunately, much like, Spotify has become a way to get discovered as a new artist, streaming is the way to get discovered as a new filmmaker. So I really think a healthy mix is where you live. Pick a couple of your favorite streaming services, or subscribe to a Shudder if you love horror movies, Criterion Channel if you like foreign stuff and more kind of art house stuff. Check out Canopy. It's a free service with a library card that you can sign up for. There's other free services out there like Tubi or Pluto TV that have lots of movies, not necessarily in the best quality, but lots of options. So if you mix them all together and you build a nice library of your favorites, so that you make sure you always have your favorites in the best quality, they're always available to you, nobody can take them away, they can't switch streaming services, The Office isn't going to come off of Netflix and go to Peacock, you have the box set of The Office and you can watch it whenever you want with no commercials. That to me makes the most sense as a consumer in 2024. Do both. There's no reason to rule one out versus the other. Do them both. They both have their pros, they both have their cons, and if you really want to watch something in the best quality, you're going to buy a 4K disc. That's the way to go. It'll never be beat, but you don't have to buy a 4K disc for every single title that comes out, or buy it on Blu-ray. It is perfectly okay to stream things. Maybe you stream things, and then if you like them, you buy the physical disc because you liked it so much. It's a great test run. It's a great test tool to figure out what you want to buy and what your interests and likes are. So do them both, ultimately. There's a battle, of course, that always will be online between these communities, but I think the reality is 90% of us are just trying to figure out what's the best combination of the two, and that would be what I'd advocate for as well. So I hope that helps. I hope that makes sense of some of the reasons you go streaming, some of the reasons you buy physical, and some of the reasons you probably should do both. If you want more videos like this, make sure you subscribe to the channel. I have tons of content like this on here going back years and years and years, and I'm refreshing some of these older videos like this to new videos with better formatting and audio so that you guys enjoy them and see them again. And I hope that if you have any questions, you feel free to reach out, because I'm super open about it. You can send me an email, leave me a comment here, follow me on Instagram, DMs are open. You can follow me right here, scan the QR code, or go in the video description and find all my links. But I'd love to see more people get into physical media, start their own little collections. Nobody needs 3,000 movies like me, but 30, 40, 50. I think it's what everybody realistically should have if you're a true film fan. It's a great way to build a collection that represents you, what you love, and make sure you have access to those movies that are constant rewatches for you. So that's it. Hope you guys have a great rest of your day. Stay safe, stay healthy out there, and I'll talk to you all soon.